Now is the time to play the Tales series. There's a sale currently going on for the Tales series where a lot of games are 90% off. Many of them are like $5, some of them are $10. All of them are good games. Yeah, even Zesteria, which I definitely wouldn't tell you to play that one first. But even if there wasn't a sale, a lot of these games are pretty cheap. So you can always wait for the next sale whenever this one goes down, but they're all worth playing. So we're going to be talking about the best place to start with that sale in mind. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the future of the Tales series, because part of this being such a good place to start is that the future's looking very interesting. Tales of Grace's F is being remastered, which actually could be a really good place for people to start because it has the best combat system in the Tales series. For those of you who haven't played Tales, I'd like to talk a bit about what kind of person Tales would appeal to, what makes them unique compared to other JRPGs. And the most obvious part is that Tales are just solid. They're just really solid games. From all the way back to the 90s until now, you can't really go wrong with any of the games in the series, except maybe Dawn of the New World, which I haven't played, so I can't really speak too much about that. There aren't really any Tales games that I would just call bad, so you get consistent quality throughout the series. And the thing that Tales does, and that they do really great, is Tales is all about the characters and their stories. And it sounds like something you would say about any story, right? But it's not really true. There are a lot of stories where the main plot is what pushes you forward. There are stories where a conflict with an antagonist is what, really keeps you engaged. But for Tales, it's all about the characters, their relationships with you and the other members of your party, and their relationship to the world. You see the different characters grow over time as you're playing, and a good example of that is in Tales of the Abyss. Luc von Fabra, for people that haven't played it, he's the main character of Tales of the Abyss. When you start the game, Luke is this arrogant child character who's way too selfish for his own good. The good of everyone around him comes to a point in the story where that has to change. He has to change, and he doesn't really have a choice. And you see Luke's reasons for this change and the effect that it has on him in such a way that it really ties you to this character. It makes you care about what happens to him. Makes you want to see him become, a better person. And this happens with a lot of different characters all throughout the Tales series. That's one thing that they do really well. It gives you it does a really good job of making you interested in the characters, giving you different viewpoints, and actually makes you care about what happens to all of them. Big part of that is the skits, which are these activatable conversations between different characters as you're walking around. Sometimes you'll just be randomly walking through, a forest. You'll get to a particular tree, and all of a sudden there'll be this pop-up that comes up, and you'll be able to start this conversation. Sometimes even just with yourself, if your character is alone. It also has a really engaging action combat system, which they've been doing since the start, which is out of the norm for JRPGs. They don't always hit the mark perfectly with those systems, but when they do, it's a lot of fun. So depending on what you're interested in, there are better or worse points to jump into the Tales series. So I would say if you're someone that is more gameplay oriented, I'd probably recommend the upcoming remaster of Tales of Grace's F. As a great combat system that it's much quicker paced than many of the others. They give you this way to dodge attacks that's very fast and fluid. There's also romance in Grace's that is much more fleshed out than in many of the other games. So if you're looking for what is the most popular game in the Tales series, I'd probably point you towards Symphonia. It has an HD version now, this remastered version, so it's more accessible. It's a very classic story of the journey which is meant to end with a goodbye and saving the world, which is actually similar in many ways to Final Fantasy X for people who like that. So if you like that, you might also like Symphonia, though it ends in a much different way than Final Fantasy X, which I definitely prefer. One of the games that in the series that you might like if you want something that is a bit different and subverts expectations is Tales of Berseria. The story is all about a pandemic that is called the Daemon Blight. It turns people into monsters. The people that control it and are protecting the world are called the Abbey and the Exorcists, but things aren't necessarily as they seem. And you learn this very early on in the beginning of the game. Since you, as the main character, end up being on this path of vengeance. It's all about revenge in the beginning, and it's a very deep story that I think I would recommend to a lot of people. So that is another place you could start. It's also a prequel to another game in the series called Tales of Zestiria, and they're tied together, which is a game that is in pretty low regard. I haven't played enough of it yet to really have an opinion on that, but probably wouldn't recommend you start there regardless. The game I would probably recommend the most for, like, generally as the starting point in the series is Tales of Vesperia. It's just overall the most solid of the games in the series. I wouldn't even necessarily say it's the best. It's just very solid overall, and I really like the cel-shaded art style. It makes I think it's the game in the series that has held up the best over the years because of that, and it helps that it's been updated and put on PC too. So that's really all I have to say about the Tales series. I would say if action, combat, character-focused stories, the anime art style, if all those things appeal to you, then you should probably give the Tales series a try. Even if it isn't necessarily something that you'd normally be interested in, there hasn't been a better time to try it out than now. There are a lot of different games in the series that are all super cheap, even outside of the current Steam sale, which, you know, by the time people see this, it might have ended, so, but that's fine. The sales will come back around probably pretty quickly, so you won't have to spend too much. If you have any favorite games in the series that you'd like to recommend to other people, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.